The Roman historian and senator Tacitus referred to Christ, his execution by Pontius Pilate, and the existence of early Christians in Rome in one page of his final work, Annals, Book 15, Chapter 44. The context of the passage is the six-day Great Fire of Rome that burned much of the city in AD 64 during the reign of Roman Emperor Nero. The passage is one of the earliest non-Christian references to the origins of Christianity, the execution of Christ described in the canonical Gospels, and the presence and persecution of Christians in first-century Rome. Scholars generally consider Tacitus' reference to the execution of Jesus by Pontius Pilate to be both authentic and of historical value as an independent Roman source. Eddy and Boyd state that it is now firmly established that Tacitus provides a non-Christian confirmation of the crucifixion of Jesus. Historian Ronald Meller has stated that the Annals is Tacitus's crowning achievement, which represents the pinnacle of Roman historical writing. Scholars view it as establishing three separate facts about Rome around AD 60: that there were a sizable number of Christians in Rome at the time, that it was possible to distinguish between Christians and Jews in Rome, and that at the time pagans made a connection between Christianity in Rome and its origin in Roman Judea. The passage and its context. The Annals passage, which has been subjected to much scholarly analysis, follows a description of the six-day Great Fire of Rome that burned much of Rome in July 64 AD. The key part of the passage reads as follows: "Consequently, to get rid of the reporters, Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians by the populace. Christus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilate, and a most mischievous superstition, thus checked for the moment, again broke out not only in Judea, the first source of the evil, but even in Rome, where all things hideous and shameful from every part of the world find the center and become popular. Accordingly, an arrest was first made of all who pleaded guilty, then, upon their information, an immense multitude was convicted, not so much of the crime of firing the city, as of hatred against mankind." Tacitus then describes the torture of Christians. The exact cause of the fire remains uncertain, but much of the population of Rome suspected that Emperor Nero had started the fire himself. To divert attention from himself, Nero accused the Christians of starting the fire and persecuted them, making this the first documented confrontation between Christians and the authorities in Rome. Tacitus never accused Nero of playing the lyre while Rome burned. That statement came from Cassius Dio, who died in the 3rd century. But Tacitus did suggest that Nero used the Christians as scapegoats. No original manuscripts of the Annals exist, and the surviving copies of Tacitus' works derive from two principal manuscripts, known as the Medicean manuscripts, written in Latin, which are held in the Laurentian Library in Florence, Italy. It is the second Medicean manuscript, 11th century, and from the Benedictine Abbey at Monte Cassino, which is the oldest surviving copy of the passage describing Christians. Scholars generally agree that these copies were written at Monte Cassino, and the end of the document refers to Abbess Reinaldus Cu, who was most probably one of the two abbots of the name at the abbey during that period. Authenticity and historical value. Most modern scholars consider the passage to be authentic. William L. Portier has stated that the consistency in the references by Tacitus, Josephus, and the letters to Emperor Trajan by Pliny the Younger reaffirm the validity of all three accounts. Scholars generally consider Tacitus's reference to be of historical value as an independent Roman source about early Christianity that is in unison with other historical records. Tacitus was a patriotic Roman senator. His writings show no sympathy towards Christians, or knowledge of who the leader was. His characterization of Christian abominations may have been based on the rumors in Rome that during the Eucharist rituals Christians ate the body and drank the blood of the god, interpreting the ritual as cannibalism by Christians. Andreas Kostenberger states that the tone of the passage towards Christians is far too negative to have been authored by Christian scribe. Van Voorst also states that the passage is unlikely to be a Christian forgery because of the pejorative language used to describe Christianity. Tacitus was about 7 years old at the time of the Great Fire of Rome. Unlike other Romans as he grew up, he would have most likely heard about the fire that destroyed most of the city, and Nero's accusations against Christians. When he wrote his account, Tacitus was the governor of the province of Asia, and as a member of the inner circle in Rome he would have known of the official position with respect to the fire and the Christians. In 1885 P. Hochart had proposed that the passage was a pious fraud, but the editor of the 1907 Oxford edition dismissed his suggestion and treated the passage as genuine. Scholars such as Bruce Chilton, Craig Evans, Paul R. Eddy and Gregory A. Boyd agree with John Mayer's statement that, despite some feeble attempts to show that this text is a Christian interpolation in Tacitus, the passage is obviously genuine. Quote, however, Richard Carrier argues that the phrase "the founder, one Christ," had been put to death by the procurator, Pontius Pilate, in the reign of Tiberius. In the passage is a Christian interpolation. He argues that even if the phrase is totally genuine, it is likely that Tacitus is merely repeating what Christians believe. Carrier also argues that there is a strange gap in the Annals of Tacitus for the period of middle 29 to middle 31 and cites Robert Drer's suggestion that the period was cut because it provided no information regarding Jesus. Suggestions that the whole of Annals may have been a forgery have also been generally rejected by scholars. John P. Mayer states that there is no historical or archaeological evidence to support the argument that a scribe may have introduced the passage into the text. The Van Voorst states that, of all Roman writers, Tacitus gives us the most precise information about Christ. John Dominic Crossan considers the passage important in establishing that Jesus existed and was crucified, and states that he was crucified is as sure as anything historical can ever be, since both Josephus and Tacitus agree with the Christian accounts on at least that basic fact. Eddy and Boyd state that it is now firmly established that Tacitus provides a non-Christian confirmation of the crucifixion of Jesus. Biblical scholar Bart D. Ehrman wrote, Tacitus's report confirms what we know from other sources, that Jesus was executed by order of the Roman governor of Judea, Pontius Pilate, sometime during Tiberius's reign. James D. G. Dunn considers the passage as useful in establishing facts about early Christians, e.g., that there was a sizable number of Christians in Rome around AD 60. Dunn states that Tacitus seems to be under the impression that Christians were some form of Judaism, although distinguished from them. Raymond E. Brown and John P. Mayer state that in addition to establishing that there was a large body of Christians in Rome, the Tacitus passage provides two other important pieces of historical information, namely that by around AD 60 it was possible to distinguish between Christians and Jews in Rome, and that even pagans made a connection between Christianity in Rome and its origin in Judea, although the majority of scholars consider it to be genuine. A few scholars question the authenticity of the passage given that Tacitus was born 25 5 years after Jesus' death. Some scholars have debated the historical value of the passage given that Tacitus does not reveal the source of his information. Thiessen and Annette Mertz argue that Tacitus at times had drawn on earlier historical works now lost to us, and he may have used official sources from a Roman archive in this case. However, if Tacitus had been copying from an official source, some scholars would expect him to have labeled Pilate correctly as a prefect rather than a procurator. Thiessen and Mertz state that Tacitus gives us a description of widespread prejudices about Christianity and a few precise details about Christus and Christianity, the source of which remains unclear. However, Paul R. Eddy has stated that given his position as a senator, Tacitus was also likely to have had access to official Roman documents of the time and did not need other sources. Michael Martin notes that the authenticity of this passage of the Annals has also been disputed on the grounds that Tacitus would not have used the word Messiah in an authentic Roman document. Weaver notes that Tacitus spoke of the persecution of Christians, but no other Christian author wrote of this persecution for 100 years. Hotheimer notes that this passage was not quoted by any church father up to the 15th century, although the passage would have been very useful to them in the work, and that the passage refers to the Christians in Rome being a multitude, while at the time the Christian congregation in Rome would actually have been very small. Scholars have also debated the issue of hearsay in the reference by Tacitus. Charles Greenbit argued that, so long as there is that possibility, the passage remains quite worthless. R.T. France states that the Tacitus passage is at best just Tacitus repeating what he had heard through Christians. However, Paul R. Eddy has stated that as Rome's preeminent historian, Tacitus was generally known for checking his sources and was not in the habit of reporting gossip. Tacitus was a member of the Quindecim Viri Sacris Faciendis, a council of priests whose duty it was to supervise foreign religious cults in Rome, which, as Van Voorst points out, makes it reasonable to suppose that he would have acquired knowledge of Christian origins through his work with that body.